My grandmother put my uncles in their place, even after she died, and I was sitting in the front row when it happened. I'm the oldest granddaughter. In every family drama story, there's always that one person who sees everything, hears everything, remembers everything, and ends up with the front row ticket to the meltdown. That's me. If this ever ends up on Reddit, it would probably be titled, "My greedy uncles tried to bully my dying grandmother into changing her will. She left them each with, well, let's just say she gave their inheritance to the last person they wanted." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. First, the matriarch. My grandmother's name was Helena Almeida. To everybody outside the family, she was Dona Helena, the little lady with silver hair in a bun who always smelled like fresh bread and fabric softener. To us, she was the center of gravity. She raised 3 kids. Ricardo, the oldest son, my uncle, the one who always believed the world owed him interest. Teresa, my mom, the middle child, the peacemaker. Luisa, the baby who inherited Grandma's spine of steel and her soft heart. My grandfather, João, worked his whole life at the steel mill. Grandma worked everywhere else, the house, the church kitchen, the neighbors' problems, and any place where somebody needed help. She never called it volunteering. She just said, if you can move your hands and walk, you can serve somebody. She hosted every birthday, every Christmas, every funeral lunch, every "we don't have money but we're still family" Sunday. If somebody was sick, she was the first one there with soup. If somebody was broke, she was the one finding mysterious envelopes of cash for them. If someone needed a place to stay, they slept on her couch and somehow woke up to a hot breakfast. She did this for decades. My uncles and aunts grew up eating food they didn't buy, wearing clothes she mended, sleeping in a house my grandparents sacrificed to keep. And when they grew up, Uncle Ricardo became the successful one. Business owner, big house, big car, bigger ego. Aunt Teresa, my mom, became the one who always showed up, even without money. Aunt Luisa married a school teacher and somehow always had just enough, even when it looked like they had nothing. And then there was me, the granddaughter, who spent half her childhood sitting in Grandma's kitchen, listening, watching, absorbing. I saw everything. The first time I realized Grandma was getting old was when I noticed she took longer to stand up from her chair. You know those quiet changes, no big dramatic moment, just slower steps, heavier breathing. Then came the fall. She was 73. She stepped on the edge of a rug, slipped, and cracked a vertebra in her lower back. The doctors said, she'll never be quite the same again. They were right. She could walk, slowly, painfully. She couldn't carry things like before. She couldn't stand in the kitchen for hours. Her world shrunk to the sofa, the bathroom, the bedroom, and whoever was kind enough to step into that little universe with her. At first, people came. The novelty of, poor Grandma, she fell, brought visitors. The whole family made promises. We'll visit every week. We'll bring dinner on Sundays. We'll help with errands. You know how it goes. Then life resumed its usual cruelty. Ricardo got too busy with the company. Teresa, my mom, still came. She always did. Luisa came as much as she could, juggling kids and work. But the real shift, it wasn't immediate. It was slow. The church ladies stopped calling. The neighbors assumed the family was handling it. The cousins disappeared into their own worlds. And the kids, my cousins that Grandma babysat, fed, clothed, prayed for, defended, barely sent a text. Still, Grandma never complained. Whenever I'd see her wincing from pain, I'd ask, "Aval, are you okay?" She'd smile and say, "Pain means I'm still alive, Menina. That's the blessing." But I started to notice something that bothered me. The only time certain relatives came around was when they needed something. "Mom, can you co-sign this loan? Mine, can you lend me some money just until the end of the month? Mom, can I store some boxes in your garage for a while?" They always needed. They never stayed. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about older people who seem modest. Sometimes they're quietly sitting on a small fortune. Grandpa had a good pension from the mill. Their house was paid off, and the neighborhood had become fancy over the years. They had savings, investments, and no debt. We didn't know how much exactly, but everybody knew there was something. And by everybody, I mean especially my uncle Ricardo. He had this habit of dropping comments like, "When my parents go, at least we'll have something to show for all these years." He said it half joking, but there's a difference between a joke and a fantasy you polish out loud. Money does something to some people. The idea of money does even worse. Ricardo and Patricia started coming around every few months, not to help with chores, not to stay and keep company, to talk, to plant ideas. "You know, mine, you should really be responsible with your will. You should reward the ones who'll know what to do with it. It's only fair after all we've done." Which was ironic because they really hadn't done much. But Grandma, being Grandma, brushed it off. God gave, God takes. While I'm alive, what I have is mine. When I'm gone, it will go where it needs to go. She said it with that little smile that used to make me wonder whether she knew something we didn't. Spoiler, she did. Fast forward a few years. Grandpa passed first. He went quickly, heart attack in his sleep. If you knew him, you'd know that was exactly his style. No drama, no long goodbye, just gone. We were still reeling from losing him when Grandma's health dropped like a stone. Her back pain got worse, her lungs weakened, her heart struggled. She went from slower but walking to can't climb the stairs to needs help to sit up in what felt like months. Soon, she was on a hospital bed in the living room. Oxygen tubes, pill schedule taped to the wall, hospice nurse 3 times a week. That's when they appeared. You know who I mean. Ricardo suddenly rediscovered he had a mother. He and Patricia started making appearances again. Always dressed well, always with that subtle perfume of pity and calculation. They would stay for 15, maybe 20 minutes. Ricardo would talk more to the nurse about her condition than to Grandma about her. Patricia would stand near the window like she was visiting an exhibit in a museum. And then one day, the visit changed. I wasn't there that afternoon, but I heard the story that night from my mom and later from Grandma herself. Grandma had asked her lawyer, my Uncle Caio, from the other side of the family, the good one, to come by earlier that week. She wanted to revise a few details in her will, just in case. Nothing too dramatic, she claimed. That same week, Ricardo and Patricia dropped by to talk. They sat at her bedside. Grandma was exhausted, in pain, but fully lucid. Oxygen tube framing her face, eyes still sharp. They started with small talk. The "how are you feeling?" they didn't really want the real answer to. Then he leaned forward. "Mine, since we're all adults here, we should talk about practical matters." Whenever someone says practical matters around a dying person, you know it's not about their comfort. "We know you've made a will, but things change. You have to think about what's best for the family as a whole." Patricia chimed in, all soft voice and fake concern. "Wouldn't be fair if everything got split in some old way of thinking. I mean, we're the ones with the bigger responsibilities. The business, the properties. We can multiply what you built and keep your legacy alive." Translation: we want the biggest slice. My grandfather, who we called Val, but I'll keep saying Grandpa, would have thrown them out physically if he were still alive. Grandma, lying there, listened quietly. She let them talk about how they were the ones who visited. They didn't. How they took care of her. They didn't. How they were the natural choice to receive most of the estate. At one point, she winced from pain. Patricia barely paused before continuing her monologue about responsibility. Finally, Grandma, in a weak but crystal clear voice, said, "Ricardo, I am dying. Can we talk about my soul before we talk about my savings?" He pressed his lips together, annoyed. "Mine, we are talking about your soul. What you leave behind says who you really loved." That line stayed with her, and with me when she repeated it later. After they left, my mom found Grandma quietly crying, something I had almost never seen in my entire life. She wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from disappointment. That was the day she made a decision. A few days later, Uncle Caio, the lawyer, came by again. This time I was there. He kissed her on the forehead, sat in the armchair next to the hospital bed, pulled out his notepad, and said, "All right, Doña Helena, let's get this right while you're still boss." She smiled at that. They talked for nearly an hour. I stayed in the kitchen with my mom and Aunt Luisa, making coffee and pretending not to listen. But the walls in that house were thin, and Grandma wasn't exactly whiskering. She listed names. She listed charities. She listed amounts. She also listed disappointments. "The ones who forgot me don't need what I have," she said at one point. "The ones who remembered me, they already have my heart. They may as well have my help." I heard her ask for certain lines to be written word for word. "And you're sure we can do this legally?" she asked. "Absolutely. We'll document everything. No one will be able to say you weren't in your right mind. You're clearer than half my clients." They both laughed. Then she cleared her throat and said, "Caio, my son, I want them to understand why. I don't want them just angry. I want them confronted with the truth once. Then they can live however they want." He nodded, more serious now. "So you want a letter included?" "No. I want a message read to their faces, and I want them trapped in that room having to listen." I remember the look in her eyes, gentle, sad, and absolutely unshakable. That was the night she finalized her last plan. Grandma outlived everybody's expectations. The doctors said a few weeks. She gave them 6 months. She held on long enough to see one more Christmas, one more round of her favorite holiday songs, one more visit from each grandchild she actually liked, one more quiet afternoon with my mom, just holding hands in the silence between conversations. When she finally passed, it was early morning. The sky was that pale gray before sunrise. My mom was there. Aunt Louisa was there. I was there. She took one long, slow breath, then another, then nothing. Just silence. We cried, of course. You never really prepare for the moment the person who held everyone together is gone. We arranged the funeral at a local funeral home, not at any church. That was her request. She said, "I don't want speeches from people who forgot I was alive. If they didn't visit me in pain, they don't get to parade my coffin." We honored that. The service was simple but beautiful. An open mic, as Grandpa had called it, at his own. Anybody who wanted to speak could come up and share a story about her. There was more laughter than sobbing, which is exactly how she would have wanted it. And notably absent, Ricardo and Patricia, at least at the front. They arrived late, slipped into the back row in their impeccable black outfits, and left as soon as the last hymn finished. No story shared, no hug, no real tears. But they were very, very present for the next event, the reading of the will. You know how in movies, the reading of the will is always this dramatic gathering? In real life, it's usually just paperwork. But in our family, it's tradition. It's an excuse to gather everybody, siblings, cousins, in-laws, old friends, and share one last moment together in the name of the person who passed. So a few weeks after the funeral, we all met at Uncle Kyle's law office. The conference room was not big. Picture a room slightly larger than a regular living room with a large table in the center and chairs squeezed around it. Because we're a large family, there were also people standing against the walls, sitting on spare chairs near the door, elbows almost touching. It was packed. I sat near my mom and Aunt Louisa. In the front of the room, next to the lawyer, were two reserved chairs. Guess who took them? Ricardo and Patricia. They walked in like VIP guests at a gala. They took their seats beside the lawyer, back straight, faces solemn, but their eyes were bright in that specific way you only see when someone expects money. They had already told anyone who would listen. Mom was always clear she wanted to take care of those who could take care of the rest. She knew who was responsible. Translation? We're getting the biggest piece. They were also the furthest from the door, with at least 20 people between them and any type of possible exit. They didn't realize how important that detail would become. The room quieted. Uncle Caio cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and looked around at all of us. He began, "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we are here to read the last will and testament of Helena Almeida. She requested that her family be present together, as you are now." He glanced down at the stack of papers before him. "Before we begin distributing bequests, Doña Helena asked that I read a statement she wrote in her own hand. I will read it exactly as written." You could feel the air tighten. He opened a smaller envelope, took out a piece of paper with her familiar handwriting, and began. "To my family, if you are hearing this, it means I have done the last thing you always tease me about. I finally stopped running around the house." A soft ripple of laughter passed through the room. That sounded exactly like her. "I have had a long life, not always easy, but full of noise, of people, of cooking oil, of burnt rice, of children's shoes, of late night talks and early morning prayers. In that life, I have done the best I could for each of you. Not perfectly, but honestly. I changed diapers, wiped tears, cooked meals, gave advice that you sometimes followed and often ignored." More soft chuckles. But then her tone shifted on the page, and you could hear it in the quiet.
The last 10 years of my life were different. My body became small. My world shrunk to a bed, a sofa, a chair. I could no longer come to you. I had to wait and see who would still come to me.
There were long days. Some of you came. You sat with me even when there was nothing for you to gain. You helped with my bath, with my pills, with my boredom. You remembered I was alive when I could no longer do for you. Others disappeared. I saw several relatives shift uncomfortably. I do not write this to accuse. God knows each heart. But I write this because there was one visit I will not pretend did not happen. When I was already with one foot in eternity, 2 members of this family came to my bed. They did not come to ask if I was afraid. They did not come to hold my hand. They came to ask about my will. They reminded me how important they are, how responsible they are, how much they deserve to be properly rewarded for being such important people. All eyes in the room slowly turned toward the front. Ricardo's jaw tightened. Patricia's face froze. That day, I felt something break for the first time, not in my back, but in my heart. And in that moment, I understood if I left my work, my house, and my savings to those who forgot me when I stopped being useful to them, I would be saying that their behavior was acceptable. It is not. The words sliced through the room. Because of this, I changed my will. The ones who loved me when I was tired will be honored. The ones who loved my usefulness more than they loved me will receive exactly what their love was worth to me in the end. Nothing more, nothing less. I do this without hatred. I do this so that the truth is spoken at least once in a room you cannot walk out of before hearing it. After today, each of you is free to live however you want, but you will not be able to say you didn't know how I felt. With love, Helena. When he finished, the room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. You could also hear the sound of 2 egos deflating. Kyle folded the letter and placed it next to his notes. He looked up at us, his voice all business again. We'll proceed with the bequest now, following the order as specified in the will. He started with Grandpa, who inherited the house, their remaining joint accounts, and the residue after all other bequests. Since Grandpa had passed before Grandma, that part would later go through his separate will. Then came the sentimental items. Grandmother's wedding ring to my mom. The old recipe notebook to Aunt Louisa. The sewing machine to one of my cousins who loved fashion. The rosary that had traveled from her mother's hands to hers, now going to her youngest granddaughter. Then came small sums of money to each grandchild. A few thousand each, enough to help, not enough to spoil. We were all stunned and grateful. Then some donations to local organizations, a community center, a food bank, a scholarship fund at the public school where she'd once volunteered. You could feel the pattern, thoughtfulness, generosity, intention. Ricardo and Patricia kept their composure, but you could almost see the math running in their heads. The amounts were climbing. The big part still hadn't been mentioned. Then Kyle cleared his throat again and said, "We now come to the bequest made by name to Ricardo Almeida and Patricia Almeida." You could feel everyone lean forward a little.
Ricardo adjusted his jacket. Patricia straightened in her chair. Cayo's tone stayed perfectly neutral. Bequest to Ricardo Almeida, eldest son of the deceased, $1 United States dollar. The words hung in the air like a slap. Somebody in the back coughed to cover a stunned laugh. I watched the color drain from Ricardo's face, then come roaring back in a deep red. Before anyone could even process, Cayo continued. Bequest to Patricia Almeida, his wife, $1 United States dollar. This time, there was no coughing to hide it. A low murmur spread through the room like electricity. You know that weird feeling when something is both horrible and deeply, deeply satisfying? Yeah, that. Ricardo shot to his feet so fast his chair almost tipped backwards. This is a joke, he snapped. Helen never writes something like that. This is manipulation. This is fraud. Patricia stood up too, pointing a trembling finger at Cayo. You are a charlatan. That woman was on morphine. She had no idea what she was signing. You took advantage of a sick old lady. The room exploded in overlapping comments. Gasps, whispers, a few muttered, "Here we go again," from cousins who had seen their behavior. Cayo remained seated, calm as a surgeon. Ricardo, he said evenly, I documented every step of your mother's decisions. We have video. We have doctor statements. We have witnesses, some of them in this room. Ricardo slammed his hand on the table. I'll see you in court. The tension snapped another notch. That's when Uncle Miguel, my mom's cousin on my grandfather's side, but everyone called him Uncle, the quiet one who always underestimated, stood up from the side of the room. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't rich, but he had something both of them lacked, decency. He moved around the far side of the table, placing himself between Ricardo and Cayo. Enough, Miguel said, not loudly, but with a finality that silenced the whispers. He turned to his brother figure. Ricardo, sit down. I will not sit down and watch this circus. Then you can step out, but you will not insult the men who honored our mother's wishes, and you will not scream in a room where her grandchildren are sitting. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. That's what made it powerful. Patricia huffed, looking ready to unleash another barrage. Miguel looked straight at her. You especially should be quiet. You weren't here wiping her mouth when she couldn't swallow. You weren't here heating her soup at 3 a.m. You weren't here when her back spasms were so bad she bit down on a towel so the neighbors wouldn't hear her scream. You could almost feel the shame crawling up her neck. You came one time to ask her about money. She remembered, and so will we. Ricardo opened his mouth again. Miguel stepped closer, voice even softer, but with steel underneath. Ricardo, you have 2 choices. Sit quietly and listen to the rest of what our mother decided. Or walk out that door and don't complain about what you didn't hear.
For a moment, I thought Ricardo would take a swing at him. Instead, he did something I'd never seen. He hesitated. His eyes swept the room, dozens of faces all watching. Not one person looked on his side. He straightened his jacket, snarled, "Fine, read the rest of this farce," and dropped back into his chair like a stone. Patricia followed, seething. Miguel returned to his place by the wall, arms crossed, eyes like a guard dog. Cayo, still calm, glanced briefly at him in silent thanks, then resumed. As previously noted, Dona Helena reduced the bequests to Ricardo and Patricia to $1 each. She then reassigned the amounts originally intended for them. He shuffled the papers, letting the tension build again. These reassigned funds now constitute the largest single bequest in this will. You could almost hear Ricardo's teeth grinding. They are to be divided as follows, Caio continued. First, a significant portion goes to the Home Care Foundation, the organization that provided nurses and aides for Helena at reduced cost when she could no longer afford all of her care outright. A nurse who had attended the funeral and was invited to the reading actually put a hand to her mouth. She hadn't known that. Caio named the amount. It was, big. There were audible gasps. Second, he said, an equal portion goes to Casa Sol Naciente, the small residential home for elderly people without families where Helena volunteered when she was younger. The look on Ricardo's face at the phrase "without families" was priceless. But Caio wasn't done. He flipped one last page, and his expression softened. The final portion of the reassigned funds goes to an individual named specifically. He looked up at the room. To Helena Almeida. My heart stopped. That's me. The room turned toward me like we were in some kind of courtroom drama. My mom grabbed my hand under the table. I could feel my face burning. Mariana, Caio read, granddaughter who came to read to me, to brush my hair, to paint my nails when my own hands shook too much to do it right. The one who slept on my couch when I was afraid of dying alone. The one who saw me when I was no longer useful to anyone in a practical way. My eyes filled with tears so fast I could barely see. To her, the letter continued in Grandma's voice, I leave not only this money, which I know she will use wisely, but also a request. Do not become bitter, Menina. Use what I leave you to build something beautiful, not to fight over the past. Let my decision be the last fight on this matter, then move on and live. The amount Caio named made my head spin. It was life-changing money, not billionaire level, but enough to pay off any debts, to buy a modest home, to start a business, to never have to worry about next month in the way my parents always had. Ricardo's eyes bored into the side of my face like he could set me on fire by sheer hatred. My instinct, absurdly, was to apologize. But then I remembered that line from her letter. The ones who loved me when I was tired will be honored. I hadn't done anything special. I had just shown up. Apparently, that was special enough. The reading concluded with some final legal housekeeping. Everybody was buzzing. Some were emotional, some were shocked, some, like a few of my cousins, looked downright impressed. Ricardo, on the other hand, looked like a man who had watched his winning lottery ticket disintegrate in front of him. As soon as Caio said that concludes the will, Ricardo stood up again. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, he spat. Caio nodded politely. Of course, I've already prepared a complete file of all relevant documents for any potential review. Medical evaluations, video recordings, dates, witnesses. You think this is over? Ricardo shot back. Before Caio could respond, Miguel did. It is over, Rick. You just don't like how it ended. Ricardo glared at him one last time, grabbed Patricia by the wrist, and started pushing through the packed room toward the door. People had to move to let him pass. Nobody rushed. It was the slowest, most awkward exit I've ever seen. Once they left, you could feel the air in the room lift like a storm cloud had just rolled out. We all sort of looked at each other, half shocked, half relieved, fully aware that we had just witnessed something we'd be talking about for the rest of our lives. In the weeks that followed, Ricardo did indeed hire a lawyer.
We got one angry letter full of legal threats, undue influence, lack of capacity, coercion. Caio responded with a professional, devastating package. A video of Grandma weeks before her death, reciting scripture and poems from memory without a single mistake. Doctors' statements attesting to her mental clarity. Signed statements from multiple witnesses, including me, my mom, my aunt, the nurse, about her state of mind. A detailed timeline showing when Ricardo and Patricia visited, what they asked, and when she changed her will. He ended with one line I loved. Should this matter proceed to court, all of these details, including the beneficiary's behavior in the months prior to Mrs. Almeida's passing, will become part of the public record. Please advise your clients before they choose whether to continue. We never heard from that lawyer again. What happens after revenge? That's the part stories don't always tell. Ricardo didn't speak to us for a long time. He cut off my mom and Aunt Louisa, blocked cousins, skipped holidays, told anyone who would listen that we had stolen what was his. Eventually, pieces of his life started filtering back to us through relatives and the small town gossip pipeline. His business hit a rough patch. He had to sell his big house and move into a smaller one. His kids, who had grown up watching him treat everyone like stepping stones, started treating him like a stepping stone. I'd like to say I felt sorry for him. And sometimes I did. Mostly, I just felt tired. Patricia, last I heard, still tells people the story of how her saintly mother-in-law was manipulated by a jealous family. She always leaves out the part where she begged a dying woman for a bigger slice of the pie. The home care organization used Grandma's donation to expand services for other elderly people like her, the ones whose families didn't or couldn't show up. Casa Sol Maciente added 3 new beds and a little activity room with books and music. I went to visit one day. They had put up a small plaque with her name, in memory of Helena Almeida, who believed no one should be old and forgotten. I cried in the hallway where no one could see. As for me, I followed her instructions. I didn't blow through the money. I used part of it to pay off my parents' debts quietly so they could finally breathe. I bought a small apartment, not flashy, just safe, mine. And then I did something I think she would have approved of. I started a small business, coordinating home help for the elderly, matching people who needed care with people who needed work. Every time I walk into a stranger's living room and see the same hospital bed, the same pill organizers, the same quiet determination in their eyes, I think of her and of that day in the conference room when her voice came back one last time to draw a line in the sand. People hear this story and say, "Wow, your grandma was petty. She got the ultimate revenge." That's one way to see it. Yes, she did put my uncles in their place. Yes, she did humiliate them in front of everyone. But if you read her letter carefully, you realize something. She wasn't just punishing their greed. She was teaching us the rest. She was showing us that love isn't measured in Sunday lunches, but in who shows up when there's nothing left to gain. That family is not a magic word that excuses cruelty or entitlement. That your last act on earth can be more powerful than all your polite silences before. She used the only tool she had left, her will, to tell the truth one last time. And she made sure there was no way anyone could walk out of that room without hearing it. So yeah, my grandmother put my uncles in their place, even after she died. And every time I remember Ricardo's face when he heard the words $1, I can almost hear her soft laugh somewhere above me. Where your heart is, Menina, there your treasure will be also. Some hearts were only worth $1. And then, of course, as always, now, stop looking back. Go live.